Here is one of the most game-changing home DIY metal shop tips that it is possible to know. And it is just so simple. You will go, why didn't I think of that? And you know how I know that you'll do that? Because that's what I did when someone showed it to me. It's not like I was smart enough to think of it for myself. Damn it. So anyway, in a previous video, this is not the tip. Here's the backstory. In a previous video, just a couple of days ago, we were making a bracket and I talked about these things, which are transfer punches, which are really clever little punches that are designed to locate with reasonable precision holes that you need to transfer from something like this, like the base plate for a vise, onto, for example, a steel workbench to mount the vise. You get your transfer punch, which has got this raised section in the center, and you just locate it in the holes, pop away, and then you just mark them out. Dead simple, right? And if you don't like this style of transfer punch in 0.5 millimeter increments, then you can get yourself a kind of one-size-fits-all solution, not unlike that, okay? Now these things are really clever as well. They work really well. You just use the cone in the pointy end to locate the hole, and you got to remember to hold this thing vertically. It's got to be as vertical as possible. You slide in the pin, you give it a little pop, and that locates the hole. And then before you drill it, obviously, you locate that little pop and you give it a much bigger pop with a proper center punch and take it over the drill press. Job done. But I got a problem, right? I got a huge problem actually, because what do you do if you pick up a new set of shears like these brilliant little throatless shears here? You want to mount them onto your bench. You only have to drill 3 holes. Like, this should be a piece of piss, and yet it's not going to be one, because I need to locate these shears in a particular place on the workbench right near the edge, and I'd like it to be square, and I want to use these M12 socket head cap screws, which I've got elsewhere holding the vise down and the swivel base, and I try and make everything consistent so that I just need one Allen key to move anything around. But here's my problem, right? I can't get the transfer punch into this space. There is inadequate clearance, and even if I could, how would I hit it with a hammer? And when I look at the smaller transfer punch as well, it'll get in there, but how am I going to give it any sort of reasonable hit just to locate the hole? Now, I know there's someone out there who thinks it might be a great idea just to measure it all up, take all these detailed measurements, measure the size of the base, measure how far in the holes are from each one of these edges, and then just transfer the coordinates. And yeah, you could do that if you really wanted to do a bunch of measurement and mathematics and get everything right and hope it all turns out okay. But there's actually a much simpler way to do this. And all you need, like you've heard of CAD, right? Cardboard aided design. Well, this is an upgrade on that. This is PAD. This is paper aided design. All you need is a sheet of plain copy paper and a bit of good, honest grime on your hands, okay? That's all you need. And what you can do is you can locate, it doesn't have to be anywhere in particular, but once you get the paper in place, don't let it slip. You can just get yourself a bit of a template, and it's got to cover the corners, right? You have to cover off the corners without letting any of that slip. Locate this other hole in here. So right now what we've got is like a template. It's really a good template because it locates all the outer features of the part that we need to fit, and the holes are precisely referenced. And how long did that take? Like bugger all, right? And now we are essentially good to go, because all you need to do now is you can get your transfer punch. This is a kind of important step. You get your transfer punch and you locate as near as you can the center of each one of these holes that you referenced, and you just spend a little bit of time making sure that that is pretty front and center. And then you turn the transfer punch up the right way and do it all again and hope that nobody noticed. And then we'll do that with the other two. So there we go. We've got all three holes absolutely marked, and they'll be within millimetre and a half. We've got more than that clearance with these holes, so there's going to be no issue with fitting it. But the pro tip is just to remember that you've got to mark it like this, because that's the way it's going to sit on the job. Because we marked that, right? And what you've got to do is transfer that down onto the bench top, like that. And you've already got an outline of where you want it to go. So we'll just go over there, make that happen, and it'll only in 10 minutes from now, those shears will be sitting on the bench, ready to rip, and we didn't need to measure a thing. To finish this particular job, all I need to do is trim the edges off the rough template so that I can locate the front and the sides of the template in the location where I want the shears to be precisely on the bench. Then it's just a matter of hitting those three holes with an automatic center punch. Then I just make those reference marks of the bench a little more definite with a full-size center punch, and I whip into it with the mag drill. It's a 10.2 millimeter hole. That's the tapping size for M12 by 1.75. But before I get started with the tap, I'm going to make sure I just deburr and relieve the top of those holes with a countersink. That'll make it nicer to touch afterwards, and it will also make it much easier to tap. And here I'm going to use my magnetic base tapping jig. That'll just make sure the holes go straight up and down 90 degrees to the surface. And I'm using some Trefoil X to just make sure the tap has the easiest possible job, because at this point the last thing I want to do is break a tap, because that's a great way to spoil your afternoon. Then it's just a matter of putting the shears in place, screwing them down, and fitting the handle. Some people play golf, dude, and I get that, but to me it's just a great way to ruin an otherwise perfectly serviceable walk. I'd rather just get a brand new toy for the Fat Cave and install it and use it to make something productive off the bat. I've got these three shims now to use. Over in the other Fat Cave, I've got a boring bar that's a little bit below center on the lathe, and I just need to shim it up a little bit. So that'll get me out of trouble there. I don't need you to go and buy a pair of shears and, you know, bolt it to your own bench, but I don't want you to forget the paper trick, dude, because they say the pen is mightier than the sword, but I would argue the paper trick blows it completely out of the water. You're welcome.